So when I was driving in this morning to record this, it was just breaking. I mean, literally, as I was pulling in, the news started coming through. And I'm not even sure what to make of it yet. But apparently, the Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan, the ones who have been locked down or under house arrest, or basically confined in Romania for years now, are suddenly on a plane to the United States. Yeah? Just like that. And according to what I've heard so far, and I'm saying this as it's still unfolding, there's been some kind of intervention from the Trump administration. Now, that immediately made my ears prick up, because you think, hang on a second, why would the Trump team be involved in that? Why now? And why them? It's the kind of story that on the surface looks like a big win for the so-called anti-establishment camp, you know, the freedom fighters, the influencers who say they're taking on the system. The kind of story that makes the headlines light up with finally the matrix couldn't hold them, that kind of thing. But something about it doesn't sit right, not with me. Not with what I've seen happen time and time again. Because you see, when something like this happens, when suddenly the people who claim to be banned and suppressed are lifted up by the same system they say is crushing them, I always stop and think, why? Why them, of all people? And I'm not saying this out of bitterness or rivalry. I couldn't care less about the social media numbers or the status games. I care about truth, about what's real. And I've been watching this game long enough to know that when the establishment helps someone, even indirectly, it's not out of kindness. There's always a reason. There's always a deeper move being played. Now, what makes this even more interesting is the timing. You've got the U.S. election cycle heating up again, Trump back in the conversation, Musk stirring things on X, AI rolling out faster than anyone predicted, and right in the middle of that, the Tates are suddenly free to travel. And of course, the headlines will all focus on the surface level drama. They'll say, see, the system's losing its grip. Free speech is winning, but I'm telling you, it's not that simple. Because power doesn't just disappear, it adapts, it evolves. And sometimes the system's smartest move is to make you believe you've beaten it, when in fact it's just changed shape. And that's what this feels like. It's the kind of story that makes the average person cheer while the real power brokers smile quietly behind the curtain, knowing they've just redirected public attention exactly where they want it. So as I sit here now, watching this breaking news roll across the feeds, I'm not thinking about the drama or the gossip. I'm thinking about what this symbolizes and who benefits from it. Because, you see, over and over, we're shown these big public moments that look like victories for freedom, but beneath them, there's always a deeper script playing out. The illusion of rebellion, the management of dissent. And maybe, just maybe, this is another chapter in that same story. So yeah, the Tate brothers might be on a plane to America. Maybe they'll land to applause. Maybe Trump will tweet something supportive. Maybe the internet will go crazy for a few days. But what I'm interested in is why. Why now? Why them? And why this way? Because whenever the system moves, it moves with purpose. And I've got a feeling, a strong feeling, that this freedom flight isn't just about two men leaving Romania. It's about something much, much bigger that's just beginning to unfold. So, let's take a step back for a moment and remember who we're actually talking about here. The Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan, two names that have practically become digital myth in the last few years. Now, Andrew Tate in particular has been presented to millions as the symbol of modern masculinity, of rebellion, of standing up to the matrix. You can't scroll 2 minutes on social media without seeing his face, his quotes, his bravado. And yet, isn't it interesting how in a world that supposedly censors dissent, this man banned from every platform, we're told is everywhere. Everywhere. Now, people say, oh, that's just because he's viral, or he's speaking truth men want to hear. And yes, maybe there's a part of that, but there's also something else happening, something we need to see clearly if we're ever going to understand how power really works today. Because power has changed its costume. It doesn't always wear a suit and tie anymore. It wears tattoos, designer sunglasses, and podcasts. It speaks like an outsider, but it acts like an insider. It sells the idea of rebellion while carefully staying within the boundaries of what the system allows to spread. That's the trick. That's how you control a generation without them even realizing it. Now, I've been doing this long enough to recognize a pattern when I see one. And the Tate phenomenon is part of a much bigger one. They've been built up algorithmically, socially, culturally to represent resistance. But resistance to what exactly? To feminism? To the media? To authority? Sure. But not to the real power structure, not to the machinery behind all of it. And that's what people miss. They mistake swagger for substance, outrage for enlightenment. They think a man shouting about freedom between ads for casinos and Bugattis is the voice of truth. But what if that's the whole point? What if the voice of rebellion has been commercialized, packaged, made safe enough for the algorithm to promote? See, that's how modern propaganda works. It doesn't silence every voice. It just chooses which voices get volume. And if the message you're spreading fits neatly into the system's grander narrative, if it distracts people from the deeper layers of control, you'll find that your banned videos travel far and wide. You'll get those mysterious boosts, the viral spikes, the strange immunity to suppression that real dissidents never experience. So when I see Tristan Tate posting about me, mocking my reach, comparing his brother's numbers to mine, I can only smile. Because it proves the very point I've been making for decades. The system rewards the voices that serve its purpose, not the ones that threaten it. It's not about who shouts the loudest, it's about who's allowed to be heard. And that's determined not by courage, but by code, by algorithms, by unseen hands deciding what trends and what disappears. Now, people will say, oh, you're just jealous. Nonsense. I've never cared about celebrity. I care about patterns. And this pattern, the rise of influencers who look rebellious but stay safely inside the digital cage, is one of the most dangerous illusions of our time. Because it gives people the feeling that resistance is happening while real power marches on, untouched. The Tates, whether knowingly or not, have become symbols of distraction. They speak about breaking free from the matrix, but never question who built it. They tell young men to reject control, but they never touch the core of what control really is, the fusion of AI, finance, and governance into a single global operating system. And that's why I'm saying this isn't personal, it's systemic. The brothers are just pieces on a much larger board. So yes, millions follow them, millions quote them, but the true question isn't how many they reach, it's who benefits from their reach. And if you follow that trail, you'll start to see the truth that very few dare to talk about, that the system doesn't fear loud voices, it feeds them as long as they're pointing in the wrong direction. So when you see the Tate brothers jetting off, shaking hands with powerful allies, and presenting themselves as martyrs of the matrix, remember this: every empire needs its rebels. Every control system needs its controlled opposition. And sometimes the most effective prison is the one that lets you believe you've escaped. So let's talk about the Trump connection, because his name, like a shadow that never quite disappears, always finds a way to drift back into stories like this one. And when I heard that phrase, an intervention from the Trump administration, I stopped for a second. Because really, think about it. What possible reason would a political powerhouse, a former president of the United States, have to get involved in the affairs of two social media influencers from Romania? It doesn't add up. Not on the surface, which means, as always, we've got to look below it. You see, Trump isn't just a politician. He's a brand, a symbol, an archetype in this modern psychological theater we call politics. He represents rebellion to one half of the population and chaos to the other. But either way, he commands emotion, and emotion is the currency of control. It's what drives algorithms, elections, and movements. And when emotion can be directed, it becomes power. Now, the Tates and Trump stylistically, ideologically, they share a certain energy. The same anti-establishment swagger, the same "they're all against me but I'm still winning" narrative. It's the classic hero versus system story. It sells, it inspires, and most importantly, it divides. Because while people are picking sides, cheering one man and cursing another, the machinery of power keeps rolling on, unaffected. So let's suppose for a moment that this intervention really did happen. If that's true, then the question isn't how Trump helped, but why? What's in it for him or for those who move around him? It's about alignment, the creation of a unified front of so-called anti-globalist figures who all conveniently keep the public conversation locked inside a narrow bandwidth. They argue about surface level freedom, speech, masculinity, culture wars, but they never dig deep into the root systems of control. AI governance, digital identity, surveillance capitalism, and the financial grid that's quietly tightening around every human being. And this is where the sleight of hand happens. Because when someone like Trump appears to champion figures like the Tates, it looks like solidarity, outsiders helping outsiders. But in truth, it reinforces a structure where rebellion becomes a brand, a product, a spectacle to consume. And think about this every time Trump, Musk, or Tate make headlines. What happens? The system gets stronger, the algorithms surge, engagement spikes, people are divided into tribes that argue endlessly, while the same corporations, the same banks, and the same governments consolidate even more control behind the curtain. That's the game. That's the theater. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're all sitting in a smoky back room plotting it together. It's more sophisticated than that. The system doesn't need direct conspiracies anymore. It just needs people who serve its pattern. People whose energy, even when rebellious, can be used to reinforce the spectacle of choice. Because that's how control works in the 21st century, not through chains, but through illusions, through the appearance of opposition. And Trump, as I've said for years, isn't outside that system. He's one of its most effective players, a master of the game who understands that people don't want truth, they want drama that feels like truth. They want a savior, a symbol, someone to project their anger onto so they can feel they're fighting back without ever realizing that the real battle isn't political, it's psychological, spiritual, digital. So if Trump really did step in to help the Tates, don't mistake that for compassion. It's positioning, it's narrative management. Because whether you love or hate him, One thing's certain, when Trump's name enters the story changes shape. It becomes emotional, tribal, distracting. And that right there is the system at work, because real power doesn't show itself. It moves in symbols, in timing, in emotional energy. It gives you heroes and villains to worship and despise, while it continues to build the digital walls higher all around you. So yes, maybe Trump helped the Tates. Maybe they're boarding planes, shaking hands, smiling for cameras. But remember this, in the theater of modern control, every headline has a purpose. And sometimes the most dangerous alliances are the ones that look like freedom. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable, because this is the part most people don't want to look at. This is where we have to ask a question that cuts right through the noise. What if the rebellion we see is the rebellion we're meant to see? What if the loudest voices shouting freedom are actually part of the cage itself? That's what I mean when I talk about controlled opposition, the illusion of rebellion manufactured by the very system it claims to oppose. See, real resistance, the kind that truly threatens power, is never rewarded with viral fame. It's ignored, buried, throttled by the algorithms, mocked, censored, discredited. But these other anti-system figures, they rise fast, they trend, they get interviewed, quoted, shared. Their sound bites flood your feed, and people think that's proof of truth. They think if the system hated them, they wouldn't be everywhere. But no, the system doesn't need to silence every rebel. It just needs to own the rebellion. That's what controlled opposition does. It gives you an outlet. It gives you somewhere to put your anger, your disillusionment, your frustration with the world, and then it guides that energy right back into safe, predictable channels. It turns revolution into entertainment. It turns outrage into algorithms. And isn't that exactly what we're seeing? These self-proclaimed anti-establishment icons, they talk endlessly about how corrupt the system is, but somehow they're always sitting on podcasts with millions of views. They rail against censorship while being boosted by the very networks they claim are silencing them. They sell you slogans of freedom, but never talk about the deeper forms of control, the digital ones, the psychological ones, the invisible ones. Because you see, that's the new kind of control, not by suppression, but by simulation, by creating fake versions of freedom that feel real enough to keep people distracted. Give them a hero, give them a villain, give them a fight, and you'll never have to fear them waking up to the fact that both sides are being played. When you control the opposition, you don't need censorship. You can let people scream all they want as long as they're screaming inside the arena you built for them. That's how the game is played now. The Tates, Musk, even Trump, they're characters in a story that looks rebellious but still serves the same master: distraction. And distraction is the oldest form of control there is. Now, people ask me, how can you say that? Don't they say things the establishment doesn't like? Sure they do. But the establishment doesn't care about words. It cares about direction. And as long as those words are steering people away from the true centers of power, the banks, the AI systems, the global digital grid being built quietly behind the scenes, they're useful, very useful. Think about it. What better way to control the population than to give them idols of resistance who never actually resist anything fundamental, who rant about the surface, about gender wars and social trends, but never about the algorithms rewriting human behavior, the data harvesting, the neural implants, the merging of biology and technology that's already underway? That's what real control looks like. It's subtle, it's seductive, it's disguised as empowerment. And the most dangerous part, most people defending these rebels genuinely believe they're fighting the system. They're sincere, they're passionate. But sincerity doesn't protect you from manipulation, it makes you easier to manipulate. Because the easiest person to control is the one who thinks they're already free. So when I say controlled opposition, I'm not saying these figures are sitting in a room taking orders from some secret council. No, it's more psychological than that. They've been shaped, rewarded, incentivized, algorithmically trained to behave in ways that reinforce the illusion of resistance. They think they're fighting the system, but the system is fighting through them. And until people wake up to that, until they stop mistaking noise for truth and charisma for courage, the show will go on. The faces will change, the slogans will evolve, but the pattern will remain the same. Rebellion, repackaged. Truth, monetized. Control, disguised as freedom. That's the genius of it. And that's why so few ever see it. Now, let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Because what's happening with the Tates, with Trump, with Musk, it's not isolated. It's not random. It's part of a wider pattern, one that stretches far beyond politics or celebrity or social media. It's what they call the fourth industrial revolution, but most people know it now by another name, the Great Reset. You've heard that phrase, I'm sure. It's been floating around for years, sometimes dismissed as conspiracy, sometimes quietly admitted as policy. But at its core, it's very simple. It's about the fusion of the physical, the digital, and the biological. Their words, not mine. And if you listen closely to Klaus Schwab, to the World Economic Forum, to the technocrats and their billionaire mouthpieces, they're not hiding it anymore. They're saying it openly. We will merge with machines. We will edit genetics. We will track every carbon footprint. And who's out front selling the shiny version of that vision? Elon Musk. The same Elon Musk who markets himself as the savior of free speech, the good billionaire fighting the establishment. Yet he's also the man building Neuralink, a company that literally implants chips into human brains. He calls it merging with AI for our own good, of course, because apparently if we don't merge with machines, the machines will outsmart us. So he says we must become one with them. And this is where it all starts to connect. Because while the world is distracted by celebrity feuds, social media wars, and political soap operas, the infrastructure of control is being built silently, efficiently, and globally. Digital IDs, programmable currencies, algorithmic governance, and now direct biological integration. This isn't the future, it's the plan. The Great Reset isn't just about economics or sustainability. It's about ownership of reality itself. It's about turning human life into data, data into currency, and currency into control. Once everything is digital, your money, your identity, your access, the system doesn't need chains or prisons. The prison will be invisible. It will live in your devices, in your behavior scores, in your neural implants. And here's the most disturbing part. It won't feel like a prison. It will feel like progress. It will be sold as convenience, as connection, as safety. Don't worry about passwords. It's all stored in your neural cloud. Don't worry about cash. It's all secure in your digital wallet. Don't worry about thinking. The AI will help you make better decisions. Little by little, choice disappears, and we call it innovation. Now, why am I bringing this up in the same breath as the Tates, or Trump, or Musk? Because these figures play a crucial role in the psychological preparation of the population. They make the system look like it has sides. They create the illusion of debate, globalists versus patriots, liberals versus conservatives, censorship versus free speech, while both sides are marching toward the same technological singularity. It's all one direction, total digital control. And it's genius, really. While people are busy cheering their favorite anti-establishment hero, the architecture of surveillance expands quietly behind the curtain. Musk buys Twitter and everyone celebrates free speech. Meanwhile, data harvesting doubles, AI moderation tightens, and the world grows more dependent on the very platforms that claim to liberate them. The system doesn't stop rebellion anymore, it hosts it. It monetizes it. It puts a friendly face on it. And that's how the Great Reset moves forward, not through dictatorship, but through seduction, through personalities that make tyranny look like transformation. So yes, talk about freedom, talk about fighting the matrix, but ask yourself, who built the matrix? Who owns the servers, the satellites, the data centers, the infrastructure that makes your freedom possible? Because the same system that gives you the illusion of liberation is quietly programming the walls around you. And every new technology they call a breakthrough is really another brick in that digital cage. And while the world stares at the headlines about who's banned or who's trending, the real revolution, the one that will redefine what it means to be human, is already underway. And here's the thing, most people never stop to consider the spiritual deception that sits quietly beneath all of this. Because you can talk about politics, technology, the Great Reset, AI, and all the rest of it, but if you don't understand the spiritual mechanism underneath, you'll never see how it all really fits together. Because at the heart of it, this isn't just a technological agenda, it's an energy war, a war for the human spirit. See, when people talk about freedom today, what they really mean is permission. They want the system to give them back the very things it took away, as if true liberation comes from outside. That's the deception. The system trains you to think your power lies in governments or influencers or movements, that some external savior will rise up and fix it all for you. But it never works like that, because that belief that someone else must do it for you is the very mindset that fuels the control grid. And this is where the so-called anti-establishment figures become so useful to the system, because they play the role of the savior. They give people a new figure to worship. For some, it's Trump. For others, it's Musk. For others still, it's the Tates. But the pattern is the same. Find a hero, follow him, and wait for him to lead you out of the darkness. But the truth is, the system doesn't care who your savior is, as long as you're waiting for one. Because as long as you believe power lies somewhere out there, you'll never take it back from within yourself. And so what we're really looking at here is a spiritual hijacking, a diversion of human consciousness. It takes the hunger for truth and freedom and redirects it into the worship of personalities, ideologies, and digital identities. It turns awakening into a brand. It turns awareness into content. It's a trick as old as time. Every empire that's ever ruled the human mind has used the same spell, distraction through devotion. Keep people emotionally invested in figures and stories, and they'll never stop to see the cage they're standing in. That's why when I look at this current wave of New Age rebellion, I don't see revolution, I see repetition. I see humanity falling into the same old trap again, but this time with better graphics and faster Wi-Fi. And what makes it so dangerous now is that technology amplifies everything. Every emotion, every belief, every illusion. People are plugged into a digital ecosystem that feeds their identity back to them like an echo chamber made of mirrors. The more you look, the less you see. Because all you're seeing is yourself reflected through algorithms that learn your weaknesses better than you do. And while that's happening, the deeper truth, the truth of who we really are, gets buried beneath endless noise. The truth that you are not your screen, your tribe, your political side, or your influencer of choice. The truth that the power to change the world doesn't come from voting for a savior or retweeting a slogan. It comes from waking up, from remembering what you are beyond the illusion of separation. This system keeps feeding you. But the system doesn't want that. It wants you divided, distracted, emotionally exhausted, spiritually numb. Because people like that are easy to guide. They'll fight each other instead of questioning the cage. And that's why the spiritual deception is the most powerful of them all. It doesn't come with force, it comes with comfort. It tells you everything's being handled, that someone else is fighting for you, that we're winning. And in that illusion of safety, you hand over your sovereignty without even realizing it. So yes, the AI agenda is dangerous. The Great Reset is dangerous. But the spiritual reset, the rewriting of what it means to be human, that's the real battleground. Because once you convince people to forget who they are, you don't need to control them anymore. They'll do it to themselves. And maybe that's why this whole thing feels so strange right now, because on some deep level, we know something's being taken from us. Not our freedom, not our money, but our connection, our sense of self, our sense of the infinite. And until we take that back, every other revolution will just be another rerun of the same play. So now we come to the heart of it, the question that's been hanging in the air from the very beginning. Why? Why were the Tate brothers really freed? Why now? Why in this way? And what does it really mean? Because the truth is, this story was never just about two men leaving Romania. It was never just about politics or celebrity or even justice. It's a reflection, a mirror being held up to all of us. It shows how easily we can be drawn into the performance of freedom while the real chains grow quieter, subtler, smarter. When the system wants to distract, it doesn't silence noise, it creates more of it. It floods your feed with stories, debates, and rivalries until you can't tell what matters anymore. And inside that fog, the real moves are made, the laws change, the technologies expand, the walls close in pixel by pixel, quietly, while everyone argues about personalities. That's what this whole spectacle represents. It's not liberation, it's choreography. It's the illusion of movement to make you think progress is happening. And while people celebrate or condemn the Tates, the deeper structure, the global digital grid of control, continues to rise unchecked. The real reason for all of this, if you want to know, is simple but uncomfortable: to keep you watching the show instead of the stagehands building the next act. The show is rebellion, the next act is control. And every time we mistake one for the other, the system tightens its grip a little more. But here's the hope, and yes, there is hope, because illusion only works when you believe it. The moment you stop giving your attention to the puppets and start looking at the strings, the spell breaks. The power that holds this system together isn't money or machines, it's belief. Your belief, my belief, collective belief. And that's something we can choose to withdraw at any time. So when you see headlines screaming about who's been freed or who's been censored, pause, step back, ask yourself, what am I being guided to feel right now? Because awareness is the first act of rebellion. Once you see the pattern, it loses its grip on you. And that's what real awakening is. Not shouting louder than the other side, not idolizing a different set of heroes, but remembering that the authority over your mind, your energy, and your spirit was never theirs to begin with. It was always yours. That's the message the system doesn't want you to hear. Because a world full of people who truly know themselves can't be controlled. They can't be divided. They can't be bought. They become unpredictable, and that's what power fears most. So the next time a story like this breaks, whether it's about the Tates or someone else, look beyond the headlines. Ask not who's winning or losing, but who's writing the script. Because the real story is never on the surface. The real story is always the one you're not supposed to notice. And maybe, in the end, that's the point of all this, not to get you angry, not to make you despair, but to make you see. To remind you that you are not a spectator in this play. You are the consciousness that can change it. So yes, the Tate brothers are free, but freedom itself is still waiting for us to wake up, to step beyond the illusions, and to start creating something new, something real. And when that begins, when enough people truly awaken, the system won't need to fall. It will simply dissolve because it will have no energy left to feed on. That's the real reset, not the one they planned, but the one we choose.